In April 1942, following the surrender of American and Filipino forces at Bataan, Imperial Japanese forces forced approximately 75,000 prisoners to march 65 miles to Camp O'Donnell in one of history's most brutal forced relocations. The march occurred during the Philippines' hottest season, with temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit as prisoners traversed jungle terrain without adequate water, food, or medical care. Japanese guards executed prisoners who fell behind, attempted to drink from roadside streams, or simply attracted attention. Survivors describe witnessing sun-out bayonet-in killings, where guards systematically bayoneted exhausted prisoners at sunset. Particularly sadistic guards forced marchers to sit for hours facing the sun without water, conducted mock executions, and made prisoners dig their own graves before executing them. The exact death toll remains disputed, with estimates ranging from 5,000 to 10,000 POWs perishing during the march itself, while another 20,000 died after reaching Camp O'Donnell from diseases contracted during the march. The few prisoners who escaped reported roadside corpses serving as grim milestones marking the route, many with hands bound behind their backs and bayonet wounds in their throats. Ancient Etruscan nobility, who flourished in pre-Roman Italy between the 8th–3rd centuries BCE, developed elaborate funerary practices including cursed tombs designed to supernaturally protect their burial chambers from violation. These tombs, carved into volcanic tufa rock formations, contained chambers filled with precious artifacts, jewelry, and decorated sarcophagi. To protect these treasures, Etruscan priests inscribed curse tablets, defixiones, threatening grave robbers with specific supernatural punishments including blindness, madness, and family extinction. Archaeological excavations reveal skeletons intentionally positioned with protective gestures, clutching curse amulets believed to remain magically active after death. Some tombs featured concealed mechanisms including poison-tipped darts, collapsing passages, and hidden pits that claim the lives of early tomb raiders. The Etruscans' reputation for powerful death magic was so feared that many tombs remained untouched for centuries, despite containing valuable treasures. Modern archaeological exploration of sites like Cerveteri and Tarquinia has discovered intact burial chambers where skeletons still hold bronze curse plates, their ancient threats still legible after 2,500 years. On November 18, 1978, in a remote Guyana settlement, 304 children died in history's largest mass murder-suicide when People's Temple cult leader Jim Jones ordered the administration of cyanide-laced flavor aid. The children, many born within the community and others brought by parents seeking a better life, died first, a deliberate strategy by Jones to eliminate escape options for hesitant adults. Medical examinations revealed that many children had been injected with poison via syringes in their shoulder blades when they refused to drink or after inadequate oral dosing. Audio recordings captured children screaming as the poison took effect, a process that causes intense, burning pain, convulsions, and respiratory failure over several agonizing minutes. Jones convinced parents this was a revolutionary act, protecting children from imagined CIA torture. In the massacre's aftermath, many children remained unidentified for days as investigators worked through incomplete records, with some victims never positively identified. Special small coffins had to be manufactured for mass burials, as over a third of Jonestown's 918 victims were minors. Until Brazilian government intervention in the 1960s, the Wari indigenous people practiced endocannibalism, the ritual consumption of deceased community members, as their primary funerary rite. Unlike sensationalized accounts of cannibalism, the Wari practice was fundamentally an act of compassion and respect. When a community member died, close relatives would prepare the body by roasting it on a funeral pyre, then dismembering it for consumption. The heart, brain, and liver were considered particularly important organs that contained the person's essence. Anthropological studies reveal that participants often consumed the flesh while weeping, experiencing profound grief rather than satisfaction. The Wari believed this practice prevented the deceased spirit from remaining attached to the physical body and allowed them to complete their transition to the ancestral realm. By incorporating the deceased's physical matter into living, community members' bodies, they ensured the person remained part of the community rather than being abandoned to cold earth. Despite Western reactions of revulsion, for the Wari, burial was considered the true desecration, an abandonment of loved ones to rot alone. In 18th century Scotland, a clandestine network of resurrection men operated as macabre entrepreneurs, stealing fresh corpses to supply medical schools desperate for anatomical specimens. These body snatchers developed specialized techniques and tools for rapid, silent, grave robbery, including iron hooks for lifting coffin lids and canvas sheets for extracting bodies without disturbing the grave's surface appearance. Operating under cover of darkness during resurrectionist season, winter months when decomposition slowed, these teams could exhume a body in under 30 minutes. To evade increasing security at urban cemeteries, smugglers established elaborate transportation networks, moving corpses in barrels marked as whiskey shipments or inside hollowed haystacks. The trade became so lucrative that organized criminal gangs controlled territories, with Edinburgh's infamous Burke and Hare eventually bypassing grave robbing altogether by murdering 16 victims for direct sale to anatomists. The scandal surrounding their 1828 execution finally forced Parliament to pass the Anatomy Act of 1832, increasing legal access to cadavers and ending the resurrection trade that had supplied thousands of bodies to Scotland's prestigious medical schools. During the Second Anglo-Boer War, 1899 to 1902, British forces under Lord Kitchener implemented a scorched earth policy against Dutch-descended Boer fighters, burning farms and forcing over 100,000 women and children into concentration camps. These hastily constructed facilities consisting of tented areas surrounded by barbed wire became death traps where approximately 26,000 civilians, most under age 16, perished from starvation, typhoid, and measles. Rations consisted of unground corn, contaminated meat, and no fresh vegetables, causing widespread malnutrition. Medical care was virtually non-existent, with one doctor typically responsible for thousands of internees. British nurse Emily Hobhouse documented conditions, photographing emaciated children and reporting that the camps were deliberately designed to weaken Boer resistance by targeting their families. Her evidence created international scandal and parliamentary investigations. Survivors' accounts describe mothers watching multiple children die in succession, with small coffins manufactured continuously in camp workshops. These atrocities represented the first modern implementation of civilian internment as warfare strategy, predating the more infamous camps of later conflicts by decades. Between 1626 and 1630, the German Prince-Bishopric of Bamberg became the site of Europe's most intense witch hunt, resulting in approximately 1,000 executions in a region with just 20,000 inhabitants. Under Prince Bishop Johann Georg II Fuchs von Dornheim, who constructed a specialized witch house, Hexenhaus, with a torture chamber, accused witches faced systematic torture including thumbscrews, leg vices, and strappado suspension, until they confessed to impossible acts of devil worship and named accomplices. Unlike typical witch hunts targeting marginalized women, Bamberg's persecution spread to wealthy citizens, government officials, and even children as young as 6. Entire families were executed, their property confiscated by the Prince Bishop, making accusations financially lucrative for the state. Most victims were burned alive at Central Bamberg's collection of permanent stakes, with executioners sometimes showing mercy by attaching gunpowder bags to victims' necks for quicker death. The persecution only ended when Emperor Ferdinand II intervened after receiving desperate letters smuggled out by prisoners, one of whom described the torture so vividly that the original documents remain sealed in German archives. Until the early 20th century, the indigenous Dayak tribes of Borneo practiced ritualized headhunting, collecting enemies' heads as sacred trophies believed to harness spiritual power. These weren't simply war souvenirs, but objects of profound spiritual significance, thought to contain the victim's soul essence or mana. After battle, skilled practitioners removed heads with specialized knives, then preserved them through a complex process of smoking, herb application, and sun-drying that prevented decomposition while maintaining facial features. The most valued skulls, those of worthy adversaries or particularly powerful individuals, received special treatment, with eye sockets inlaid with mother-of-pearl and jawbones wired shut. These preserved heads were displayed in communal longhouses and incorporated into crucial ceremonies including weddings, funerals, and agricultural rituals. A village's skull collection determined its spiritual protection and prestige. Colonial authorities outlawed the practice in the late 19th century, but it briefly resurged during World War II when Allied forces paradoxically encouraged Dayaks to collect Japanese soldiers' heads, temporarily legitimizing the ancient tradition for military advantage. During Europe's devastating Black Death pandemic in the 14th century, a bizarre phenomenon emerged. Groups of plague survivors engaging in frenzied, uncontrollable dancing in public squares. These dancing plagues, or choreomania episodes, involved dozens, sometimes hundreds of individuals dancing without rest for days, often until collapsing from exhaustion or suffering fatal heart attacks. Contemporary accounts describe participants appearing entranced, screaming of visions and bizarre hallucinations while dancing. Medieval physicians theorized these dancers were victims of hot blood or demonic possession, while modern researchers suggest ergot fungus poisoning or mass psychogenic illness triggered by extreme trauma. The largest recorded instance occurred in Strasbourg in 1518, where approximately 400 people danced continuously for a month, with dozens dying from exhaustion, stroke, and heart failure. Authorities initially encouraged the dancing, believing it could cure the dancing disease, even constructing special stages and hiring musicians before realizing the fatal consequences. These macabre dances represented both the psychological breaking point of communities devastated by plague and a desperate search for catharsis amid overwhelming death. In January 897 CE, one of history's most macabre judicial proceedings took place in Rome, the Cadaver Synod, where Pope Formosus's 9-month dead corpse was exhumed, dressed in papal regalia, and put on trial. Pope Stephen VI, driven by political vengeance, had the decomposing body propped up on a throne in the Lateran Palace, while a deacon answered charges on behalf of the corpse. Formosus was accused of perjury, coveting the papacy, and performing clerical duties as Bishop of Rome, while already bishop of another diocese. After being found guilty, the corpse had 3 fingers of its right hand, used for blessings, hacked off, all papal vestments stripped away, and was thrown into the Tiber River. The trial shocked even medieval sensibilities, triggering a popular uprising that imprisoned Stephen VI, who was later strangled in his cell. Formosus's remains were recovered by a monk and eventually reburied with proper honors, while the synod's proceedings were officially annulled by Pope Theodore II months later. Stalin's Siberian gulags became frozen tombs for millions of political prisoners, many of whom perished anonymously in the vast Arctic wilderness. These labor camps, operating from the 1930s to the 1950s, were strategically placed in regions where winter temperatures regularly plunged below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, making escape impossible and survival unlikely. Prisoners worked 14-hour days mining gold, cutting timber, or building railways while subsisting on rations of 300 grams of bread daily. Those too weak to work received half rations, creating a deadly cycle of starvation. The dead were buried in mass graves so shallow that spring thaws would often expose corpses. Modern climate change has accelerated the thawing of Siberian permafrost, revealing these unmarked burial sites with increasing frequency. In 2019, researchers in Norilsk discovered a mass grave containing over 1,000 bodies, many showing signs of execution by gunshot. Most victims' identities remain unknown, their prison records deliberately destroyed after death to erase evidence of the regime's brutality. Ancient Chinese communities along the turbulent Yellow River practiced a desperate form of flood control, human sacrifice. Young women, known as river brides, were ceremonially drowned during dangerous flood seasons as offerings to the river deity, He Bo. These sacrifices, documented in texts dating back to the Warring States period, 475 to 221 BCE, involved selecting young women considered particularly pure or beautiful. The chosen victim would be adorned in wedding finery, paraded through the village, and then thrown from boats or ceremonial platforms into the raging waters. Historical records indicate these sacrifices increased during periods of severe flooding, sometimes involving multiple women from different villages along the river's path. The practice was so entrenched that many families living near the river raised daughters specifically for potential sacrifice, believing this ultimate offering would ensure community survival against the river's devastation. Archaeological evidence from riverbank burial sites confirms these accounts, with remains of young women found with ceremonial objects and wedding attire dated across several dynasties. Renaissance. Italian noble families perfected the art of assassination through lavish feasts where rivals were eliminated with meticulously prepared poisons. The Borgia family, particularly Cesare and his father Pope Alexander VI, became infamous for these deadly dinners disguised as reconciliation celebrations. Arsenic-laced wine was the preferred method, producing symptoms easily mistaken for natural illness. Court poisoners developed sophisticated delivery systems, including hollow ring fingers containing powder that could be secretly dropped into a specific guest's goblet. The Borgias reportedly maintained detailed records of which poisons worked most effectively and how long each took to kill. At one infamous banquet in 1499, multiple members of the Orsini family were poisoned simultaneously, eliminating an entire rival faction in a single evening. These poisonings were so common that wealthy Italians employed food tasters and carried antidote kits containing unicorn horn, actually narwhal tusk, and bezoar stones, believed to neutralize toxins. Following Cambodia's genocide under the Khmer Rouge regime in the 1970s, survivors embarked on a grim mission, collecting skulls and bones from killing fields to identify missing loved ones. As the rain washed away soil from mass graves, fragments of humanity emerged, prompting villagers to gather these remains. These amateur archaeologists of atrocity created makeshift memorials, sorting bones by type and arranging skulls in improvised stupas, Buddhist reliquaries. The bone collectors worked without tools or forensic training, guided only by grief and the need for closure. The Cambodian government later formalized this practice, creating official memorials like the Choyong Ek Genocidal Center, where 8,000 skulls are displayed in a glass stupa. Most bone collectors never found their specific relatives among the anonymous remains, but their efforts created physical proof of the regime's brutality. These collections remain controversial, with some arguing for proper burial while others insist they remain visible as evidence against historical denial of the atrocities that claim nearly 2 million lives. In 16th century Nuremberg, executioners maintained meticulous records of their grim profession, creating detailed diaries documenting every aspect of public beheadings. These execution journals, preserved in municipal archives, reveal the chilling professionalism behind capital punishment during the era. Executioners recorded victims' names, crimes, final words, and technical details like blade sharpness and maintenance procedures. One famous executioner, Franz Schmidt, who performed over 600 executions between 1573 and 1617, noted how many strokes were required for each beheading and the condition of the body afterward. These executions drew massive crowds of thousands, often becoming festive occasions with vendors selling food and souvenirs. The executioner's profession was paradoxical, considered dishonorable yet essential. Executioners were well-paid specialists who couldn't be touched or addressed directly by common citizens. Their diaries reveal a surprising humanity, occasionally expressing doubt about particular sentences while faithfully carrying out their duties. In colonial India, widows who were prevented from performing sati, ritual self-immolation on their husband's funeral pyre, faced a terrible fate. They were believed to carry a curse that would bring misfortune upon their families. British authorities outlawing sati in 1829 created an impossible situation for many widows, who were now both forbidden from dying and unwelcome among the living. These women, heads shaved and stripped of jewelry, were ostracized from society and blamed for surviving their husbands. Families often banished them to widow ashrams or temples where they lived in extreme poverty. Many were driven to suicide through starvation or consuming poison to escape social condemnation. The widow's curse was believed so powerful that families would perform elaborate rituals to cleanse themselves of association with these women. Historical records show that despite the ban, thousands of widows still died by suicide annually, well into the 20th century, victims of a cultural belief system that condemned their survival. During the height of the transatlantic slave trade in the 18th century, sailors occasionally encountered a terrifying sight: slave ships drifting silently with no living souls aboard. These ghost ships typically contained the corpses of both crew members and enslaved Africans. Victims of disease outbreaks, particularly smallpox and dysentery, which could sweep through the cramped, unsanitary vessels with devastating speed. In other instances, successful slave revolts ended in tragedy when captives couldn't navigate the ships to freedom. These abandoned vessels were discovered floating off the African coast, sometimes circling in currents for weeks before discovery. Superstitious sailors often refused to board these ships, believing them cursed. Maritime records from Portuguese and British naval vessels document numerous encounters with these phantom ships, their sails tattered and decks silent except for the creaking of wood against the waves. Grim monuments to the brutality of the slave trade that claimed millions of lives. In 19th century New Orleans, a sinister system operated in the shadows of society. Secret auctions that sold kidnapped free Black Americans into slavery under the false pretense of legal sales. These clandestine events took place in hidden warehouses, accessible only to select buyers with connections to this underground network. Victims were often drugged, transported at night, and given false documentation. Auctioneers intentionally kept no records of these transactions to conceal their crimes, effectively erasing the identities of the kidnapped. Many victims had been living as free citizens for years before being captured. These auctions represented a particularly cruel betrayal of America's promises of freedom, as individuals who had obtained their liberty through legal means were thrust back into bondage through criminal enterprise. The practice was so secretive that even today, historians struggle to document the full extent of these kidnappings, though personal accounts from survivors eventually exposed this brutal system.